Execution is critical to success. Execution represents the disciplined process or a logical set of connected activities that enables an organization to take strategy and make it work. Without a careful, planned approach to execution, strategic goals cannot be attained. Developing such a logical approach, however, represents a formidable challenge to management. Even with careful development of an execution plan at the business level, execution success is not guaranteed. Although execution is critical to strategic success, making strategy work presents a formidable challenge. A host of factors, including politics, inertia, and resistance to change, routinely get in the way of execution success. Plans still fail or wither on the vine because of poor execution. Based on the previous resources I provided and some of the readings I referred to this week, some of these ideas around execution should be clear. First of all, you should know by now that we use the terms execution and implementation interchangeably. And we also understand that many factors and dynamics can interfere with the implementation of strategy. In other words, even if a strategy is amazing, well conceived, it can be doomed to failure in the implementation process. And that, of course, assumes that the strategy is well conceived in the first place. This week, we focus on strategy execution, also implementation. As mentioned before, implementation refers to carrying out a given strategy. In other words, once we've conducted necessary research and we've done our analysis, we've determined our strategic problem, and we've figured out how to solve it, we have to decide how we're going to carry out that solution. There are many moving parts here. Strategy needs to be okay for one, and there are absolutely no guarantees. Organizations often fail at strategy execution. Various sources have reported implementation failure rates at between 60 and 90%. At this point, we've acknowledged that implementation is important. It's subject to high failure rates, and that barriers to implementation are diverse. But there are things that organizations might pay attention to increase the possibility of strategy being implemented effectively. Today, we're going to focus on those levers, those things that might be important to effective implementation. And more so, these things are those that are under control of an organization. The implementation levers that we'll talk about today are called poolers. It's an acronym to describe P, policies and procedures, O, organizational culture, O, organizational structure, L, leadership, R, resources, E, evaluation or monitoring, and S, systems, which include reward systems. We'll be talking about evaluation last, however. So what are policies and procedures? We all know them. We all see them in our organization. These are rules, steps, processes to follow in an organizational task. They're a reality of organizational life in one incarnation or another. They guide our work in whole or in part. While policies and procedures are operational in nature, these align with the larger organizational strategy. For example, we might find when a new strategy is implemented, the policies and procedures are changed. For example, imagine strategic change in Police Unit X. This is obviously a fictitious example. Police Force X exists within a pretty rough city. The current police chief believes the only way to support a community is to rule with an iron fist. In other words, the approach is punitive, judgmental, and authoritarian, with a general mentality of teaching people lessons and showing them who's boss. A new police chief will be entering into the chief position in a few months. The new police chief has a radically different view and has already proposed the introduction of a new strategy. The new approach will be less authoritarian, more humanistic, with an eye towards police getting to know the communities they serve and becoming part of them, seeing the people as opposed to culprits and convicts. You can see how a change in the strategy of the police unit, such as above, can have impacts for the policies and procedures that police will follow in their daily work. Not only, in other words, will it affect the types of policies in place, but how these look in their details. In effect, we can see how policies and procedures can support or reinforce a strategy's implementation, or alternatively, how they can stand in the way. Ensuring policies and procedures align in content and in spirit is quite important if it makes sense to those who are charged with carrying out the policies and procedures. Ensuring, in other words, that policies and procedures align with the strategy and make sense to those who carry them out are critical success factors. The first O in poolers refers to organizational culture. Organizational culture can be described as the look and feel of the place, the intangible characteristics of the organization. Though culture is intangible, it might be reflected in more definable elements of a firm. For example, its policies, particularly its rituals, and it permeates an organization's whole being. So while we might be able to describe these reflections or manifestations of culture in terms of the ways that people behave, whether they refer to the organization as us or them, whether they participate in some sort of ritual, whether they have things that that symbolize the organization. We might be able to describe those reflections or manifestations, but can't necessarily capture the essence of a culture because it's more felt than describable. Organizational culture can be very strongly motivating or demotivating. A strong culture can be seen to carry its organizational members, engulf them, whereas a weak organizational culture just might not motivate or grab anybody or cause anybody to want to really be part of it. In fact, a weak culture can even alienate members of an organization. Some of the concepts associated with culture, a few of which we've mentioned before, are us versus them attitudes, certain norms of behavior, some tribal concepts such as rituals, and of course the existence of subcultures. I have a few video clips that I'm going to provide for you so you can help understand organizational culture in action in a few organizations that we're familiar with.